Hello again, and
Hi.
welcome to Defense Diaries. I'm your host Bob Mata, and this is our weekly Q&A with the brilliant and talented co-host of mine from Murder on Songbird Road, the podcast. What's up, Lauren? How you?
Not much, but I think there's some confusion as to when this is starting tonight.
Well, so when I was setting it up, apparently I set it up for 5:40, and then we were gonna portal because we can redirect everybody from the live that Allie just ended, where we had a lot of people in there. And but I think she ended it before I started this one. So we didn't get the benefit of it. But hopefully a bunch of people will come over anyway. But yeah, I had a long day, Lauren. We were watching that Karen Reed hearing, which went from 11 until like 4:15, something like that. And then we were chatting with people after. So I had a 5-minute break before I came to hang with you. So
You'd
there you go.
never know it. Look at you, fresh as a daisy.
Tiny hand knows it. Tiny hand knows it.
Oh gosh, that
So
reminds me of the Kristen Wiig character, SNL, the Singing Sisters, where she plays the character with the tiny
yes,
hand.
yes, which I love. I love desperately. So what's going on? What's good? What's good in the world?
I am busily compiling episode 11. It is great, but there's just so much to put in to what for now is the final episode.
I know you're trying to wrap. You're trying to wrap. That's the last episode of a season is always the hardest because you're really trying to summarize, you're trying to hit all the big points, you're trying to make bold statements that are memorable. It's like it's a lot of work. A last episode's a different thing. It's a different beast. It's like anything, like writing the end to a book is very difficult, especially for
Well,
Stephen King. Like the guy,
oh, I love
as
Stephen
much
King.
as much as I love him, the guy is not great at writing endings. He's just not. I mean, there's been
Well,
a few.
I have a notebook that I carry around and everything, and there are 3 whole pages dedicated to every single time I say, "Remember that name," or "We'll come back to that," because I have to make sure that I tie up all the loose strings. So that's what
Yeah,
I've been doing this week, but all good. And,
yeah.
busy news day in terms of trials, crime, wrongful convictions, all of the
What
above.
what's going on? Like I've been completely oblivious because we've been on this read thing all day. Give me the cliff notes. What's going
Well,
what
so
what's the big news?
Supreme Court ruling, which I'm sure you do know about, in terms of Richard Glossop, that they have ruled that he deserves a new trial,
Wow. Wow.
which, boy, was that a long time coming.
Wow.
And you know who's involved with his case?
Who?
Kathleen Zellner, I believe,
Oh,
a
wow.
formidable defense attorney with an excellent firm.
Indeed. Indeed, she is. Wow. So all right, so that came down today, huh? All right. Was that the US Supreme Court? Wow. The big dogs.
The big ones.
The big
I'm
dogs.
trying to reconfigure my head because I had a friend who was on the last live who told me that it looked like the painting was growing out of the back of my head. So I'm trying to avoid that.
I mean, it still looks like it's growing out of the back of your head, but it's a
More
good
just like
look.
an ear, like a jaunty cap set to the side now.
Wait, use the word jaunty again for me because it's delightful. So, all right, so let's talk about 8. All right, now before we get started, Joe, I once again neglected to put the community page, which you guys never use anyway, so I don't feel that bad about it. But what we want you to do on the front end, which will really, really help me when we're going through, is if you have a question, and I'm stealing this from Lawyer Lee. I know that she does this, but it's a good idea, so that I know it's more visible to me. Put a question mark or 2 at the beginning of your chat statement. That way I know when I'm going through to stop on it and to mark it as a question. Okay. And remember, we're not just taking questions on 8, we're taking questions on 1 through 8. So anything, or if it's not even a question, if it's a discussion point, anything that you guys want to talk about, because that's why we're here, we want to talk about it. So just if you can help me help you by following that rule, just so I know, because when I look through it, it's tough. It's tough for me to kind of pick out, especially if I'm going up towards the top and I'm scrolling back down. Sometimes Lauren will see a question, and I typically like to, yeah, sorry, Mandy. I mean, maybe if Mandy were starring the questions for me, I don't know. I wouldn't have to have that weird question mark in the beginning rule. All right.
I like Mandy.
Oh, Mandy's sass.
Mandy's salty. I love
Oh
that
yeah.
in a
Oh yeah.
lady.
She don't take no shit.
Mm.
That's for sure. That's for sure. So, well, let's get the conversation started. So, what did you like? What were your biggest takeaways from 8? Like when you were writing 8, like, and when you're structuring a podcast, which serializes a long form story, I like to think of them as kind of audiobooks on steroids, because obviously you're incorporating interviews and just all kinds of like live commentary between you and I. Like they're different. It's what makes podcasts special. It's the difference between a podcast and an audiobook. But still, you are trying to create and you are creating a cohesive, flowing story that has a beginning, a middle, and an end. So as we're getting to 8, like what were the things that you said, you know what, these are the things, because this is stuff that we may have discovered months ago, and where you're trying to figure out where to kind of put it in, you've got to try to pick and choose and say, okay, like, are you storyboarding it, or do you just use your little notebook there?
I use storyboards, the notebook, and post-its. You can't see, but there's like a huge monitor that does nothing but serve as a place for me to move my post-its around. You and I discussed, the first thing that any attorney really should do, ideally, as they prepare for trial, is to prep as if they were the opposing side. You have to really understand both sides of an argument. And in a case like this, when we came in with no preconceived notions, it was very important for me as a non lawyer to wrap my head around what the defense was thinking as they were leading up to trial and what the prosecution was thinking leading up to trial. And the foundation for both of those arguments has to be the investigation. What was good about the investigation, what was weak about the investigation, and all of that. And at the same time, you and I were going through the very real process of not only acclimating ourselves to the important facts and issues with the murder and the investigation, and both the defense and the prosecution, but we were trying to put real people to the names as well.
Right.
And so, we talked about the fact that the first, I would say, 4 episodes are really spent understanding why Beverly was convicted. And then, then tackling the dauntingly emotional facts surrounding her pregnancy while a pretrial detainee, and then her birth while in custody, really shifts one's perspective. Because again, I sound like a broken record about this, but the presumption of innocence did not appear to exist in this case. And I think in no area is that more telling than the way in which Beverly was treated while pregnant and the way in which she was forced to give birth. So that leads 6 through 11 to really then kind of touch upon how both sides proceeded to try this case in front of a jury. I will say, and then we'll take some questions, that you and I were kind of blindsided by the number of bombshells that were dropped with each answer we got in terms of the official investigation and the prosecution as well, in terms of what was tested, what was not tested, um, who was put on the stand, who was not put on the stand. So, in many ways, 5 through 11 almost wrote themselves because there were so many breadcrumbs to follow in terms of that twisting trail and trial.
Yeah, I mean, for certain. And it's like our investigation, because our investigation in terms of us being in Marion and talking to all the people that we talk to is a different thing than us kind of reviewing the transcripts from the trial and seeing where that thing, like how it ended up, which became evident. I mean, we've talked about that at length in terms of, when you have a prosecution come in with like just a case on a platter type case like this, where you've got, just a built-in defendant who is in that house, who is of mixed race, who, there doesn't appear on its face, if you're to I guess, completely disregard her statement of what she says happened. I mean, and you have that case and you walk into court and it goes almost entirely uncontested. It becomes very, very clear why she was convicted. So, and then the challenge, once the conviction is in place, is to try to walk it back, because once you get that stamp convicted on you, trying to wash it off with like soap is trying to wash like a tattoo off. It's really hard to do, and ultimately you have to go get it surgically removed, which is the equivalent of what it's like in the criminal justice system. And it is really, really hard to do, and you don't ever really get rid of it all the way. Even if she's given a new trial, and we've talked about this, and she prevails and she's exonerated, I mean, there's still going to be people, because she was convicted that one time, that will always think that she's the one who did it. So no, Stephanie, Murder on Songbird Road is an iHeart production, and it is a standalone podcast. It's everywhere that you want to get your pods. It's Apple, Spotify, all the places. So no, it's not under the Defense Diaries umbrella. Completely standalone, and you'll find it on Lauren's feed. So if you look in Lauren's Murder In series, which is Murder in Miami, Murder in Oregon, and Murder in Illinois, Murder on Songbird Road is in that feed. It appears as there's 4 seasons in there.
I think they've separated it now for simplicity's sake, but you can.
I was re-listening to Vaughn again last night. There's on Apple, it's still all
jumbled up.
4 seasons. They have it as seasons at least.
Yeah, that's better. So
it's still clunky, because I have to it's like I have to go all the way out. Like if I hit season 2, which is Vaughn, it'll pull me out, and then it brings me back in to Vaughn's season. So I don't. It's weird. It's like
tomorrow
got some work to do.
Tomorrow we'll talk to Taylor.
Yeah,
because it's iHeart. iHeart did it.
Really?
iHeart messed it up. Yeah, I want to bring back a point that Delightfully Chaotic made. And she's not being sarcastic, saying that our investigation is much more thorough than what the police conducted. Keep in mind, everyone, that Julie Beverly was arrested 4 days after the murder. And 4 days after the murder, they claimed that they had proven her story of encountering a masked intruder to be false, but never explained how they did it. And I will promise you that you will remember that I said that once you've listened to episode 10, particularly. But I, for me, what struck me most about assembling this was it really gave me a chance to dive into the interrogation video and into the DNA collection. And there is something exquisitely painful about watching that snapshot in time, um, because you are watching Beverly do what we've both said no one should ever do, which is agree to speak to the police without legal representation. Had Beverly not done that, she would not be berated with the biggest nagging issue that people remain to hold on to, which is the quote unquote lie about Walmart. If she had had a lawyer, she would not have made that misstatement because remember, not but 2 days later, she remembers, oh my God, I stopped at Huck's. They called that tip in to Carl Gustantine. Renee called that tip in. And had Julie not agreed to go into questioning without legal representation, that wouldn't be used against her to this day.
And if you look at that case and you pull out the lie about going down there, I mean, and it's hard to do because we've heard it and it's kind of seared into your brain and you can't unring bells and all that stuff. But if you're able to kind of do this mental exercise where you pull that out as if it doesn't exist and you look at the facts and the evidence, where does that leave you in this case? If that lie, misstatement, whatever you want to call it, mismemory, whatever it was, if you pull that out and you look just at what was presented as far as actual evidence of the crime being committed by Julie Beverly, like where do you land on that case? I mean, like, and to your point, if she doesn't say that she went down to Walmart and they're able to sniff it out, if are they giving more credence potentially to what she claims happened? Like, because as far as law enforcement goes, once you tell a lie like that, in terms of it seeming like you're trying to alibi yourself, you're screwed. In their minds, you become like you have no other. That's just how cops operate. That's how they operate.
You
As
you
soon as
put
that
it
happens,
very very eloquently in the podcast, but you know, I said that lying is never a good idea. Lying to the cops is a particularly bad one,
yep,
and you said it's the easiest way to get oneself arrested.
yep, it's true. I mean, it's like you just so it's like
Now, cops are allowed to lie to you,
yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah.
but you're not really allowed to lie to them.
No, I mean it's a bad idea. It's a bad idea. And again, like what the impetus of her saying that was still remains a bit of a mystery. It does. I think there's, and again, you always have to go and try to think of this from both perspectives. If you're looking at it from the perspective of Julie walking into a masked intruder and then discovering a child that she loves and a child that she was supposed to be watching has been brutally killed, and trying to figure out where your mind would be at that moment in time. I mean, I see a world in which things in your mind become a mess.
Mhm.
Things might stop and it's like I can't sit here. It's so easy to sit back and say the things that you'd never do, or I'd never do that. I'd never say. No one knows any of that. I've said this a million times. You don't know what you do in a situation like that unless you're in it. You can't, there's no way to recreate it. There's no way to try to put yourself in that situation doing mental gymnastics, because it just doesn't work. You just feel like there's so much going on physiologically with you that it's impossible to do. So,
I wanna stop quickly because there were, like, 4 excellent questions that we
all
talked
right,
through.
let
But Brandy's asked if
this
the
one,
evidence could be
this one,
retried, even before this, but the same person.
same concept. Okay.
Yes, so in an
Re-
ideal world, if the case ends up going back to trial, if the conviction is overturned and she's retried, there is a bunch of existing things that should be tested. Absolutely, Jade's electronics. Absolutely, Julia Beverly's nail scrapings. Absolutely, more of the evidence around the house that was not. These are kind of legal oriented questions for you.
Well, I mean, and it begs the question, which I don't know the answer to. And now that I started, like, based on that question, I started thinking about it. I would hope that
I was just about to say.
a motion for preservation of the evidence was filed on this, directing law enforcement and or the prosecutors or whoever has the evidence, that they are ordered to preserve it in the event that there is another trial. I mean, like, the nightmare scenario is that nobody filed that on her behalf, and then us knowing what we know about law enforcement down there and them not being happy with this
Shenanigans,
podcast.
jackassery, those things.
Yeah,
Um,
you always have to worry about that because, as Lauren said, I mean, if she's granted a retrial or a new trial and the new lawyers come on, I mean, they're going to make moves to get this stuff tested. They're certainly going to be saying, "Hey, like any kind of DNA, the labs have changed in the last." I mean, the technology with DNA evolves day to day. Where we were years ago, we're I mean, 5 years time, 6 years time, which it would be probably, is a lifetime in terms of the advancements that you see in that type of science and technology. So,
and without any spoiler alerts, we can safely say that there was a very real um, pattern of only testing things that could support or perpetuate the prosecution's aw,
oh, okay, love you. Sorry.
um, only testing things that could support or further the prosecution's theory. And so one would hope in an ideal world, knock wood, that you could go back then and look at the things that could be potentially exculpatory for Beverly. Delightfully chaotic. I think you know the answer to this. Yes. So we will get into this in a later episode, but this is not a spoiler. This is a teaser. Um, there was unknown male DNA found underneath Jade Beasley's nails in her nail scrapings. And it was not fully tested or developed enough to show a profile. Um, Mr. Mata is quite sure that he is linked with individuals who could possibly take another pass at that.
Yeah.
But again, that all is as I ended this episode saying, now it is going to be a daunting task to undo the wrongs that have been done in terms of the trial and the investigation.
Right. I mean,
Um,
it's a lot. It's a lot. You know, because in this particular episode, you get to hear portions of the interrogation, and you know, you get the sense of, because I've got a very simple rule for every client that's ever walked in my door, every potential client that's ever called us. And Allie has the same rule, and any good defense attorney has the same rule. And it's, you just shut the F up. You don't talk to the cops. You always lawyer up, always. And I mean, and this goes to back when Lauren was talking about this 10 minutes ago. I mean, think how differently this could have gone had Julie just shut the F up. But from Julie's perspective, and I think that this is a great cautionary tale for every single person out there, that Julie, when she's sitting in that interrogation room or interview room, whatever you want to call it, is not thinking, like, authentically, genuinely is not thinking that they think that she did this. So she's not in that defensive posture. She's not of, oh geez, do I need to get a lawyer? Like, right. You know, I mean, and that should be instinctual. Like the first thing, like that's what I'm here to tell you, that that concept of lawyering up, especially if you're innocent, but always, is get a lawyer, because you need that buffer. You need that person who is knowledgeable in the ways of police operation and the things that they do. You need them in the room with you.
I 100% agree, but I also 100% understand how, in the throes of a horrible event, trauma, grief, all of it kind of imploding at the same time, if you are confident of your innocence, it's probably human nature, and police know that, and so they can manipulate you into feeling guilty for even requesting an attorney, you
Oh, they
know?
they absolutely do. Like,
And
what do you need a lawyer for if you don't have
yeah,
anything to hide? You
I
know,
I
it's
thought
that move.
I thought
Right.
you said you didn't do it,
I thought you were
but
trying to help us here. I thought you were trying to help us get the you know, I mean, like all that shit.
and that probably is, an extra layer of what makes watching this particular interrogation so painful. Um, no spoiler alerts on it, but, rest assured that Miranda warning or Miranda rights, depending upon the state in which you live, they mean it. Anything you say can and will be used against you. And there are no shortage of wrongful convictions that are a direct result of that decision in that moment to agree to be interrogated without representation.
Because I would posit this argument that the fact that she did not lawyer up, the fact that I tend to agree with you that her state of mind going into that thing, it wasn't even a concept because she just didn't let her mind go there because it wasn't something that she thought was a possibility, speaks to me to innocence, because any person that had committed that crime, there is no way on God's green earth for 1 second that would be thinking that they wouldn't be looking at her or me if I'm Julie. You know what I'm saying? Meaning, if I had committed that crime, there's not a chance in hell that I'm thinking that they're just going to buy my story about the masked intruder and they're not going to be looking at me as a potential suspect.
Again, you're a defense attorney, and you and I have we've debated this at other times, but I'm telling you, if I ran to the local Trader Joe's or Aldi, so 20 minutes, and got back and something horrible had befallen a family member and I called the police, it would not be in my mind that they would ever, as you say, like
I
me
don't
for it.
believe that.
It just
I don't
wouldn't.
believe it. I don't
Even
believe it.
with my, like, true crime
I don't believe
background,
it. I don't believe it. I think like it's especially you. Like if like I'm not buying that shit for 1 second. I think immediately like again, you've got to filter through the trauma that you'd be going through at that point in time, which would be catastrophic. So in terms of your mind's not working the way it normally would, at some point when you're able to, if you're able to catch your breath and you make the call to 911, at some point you're smart enough to know that you're the last one to see the child. You're the one to call it in. They always look at the family first. Like these are all just facts that exist in the
Yes,
world.
but again, in that moment, as the police show up, they're there to help. You need their help. And I can see in that moment having them say, will you come down to us, come to the station with us, answer if you, of course I will. And you're worried too that it would probably look pretty suspicious if I demanded an attorney right now.
No, but like it's not right now. It's down the road. It's when she's sitting at the police station. So some time passes.
Well,
You know,
and you hear Cindy Geitman reading her, almost forgot, by the way, to read her Miranda warning. I'm scrolling through the script because I want to make sure that I'm not giving a spoiler. See how good that is?
yeah, I like it.
Um, oh, and I think Spitfire Dragon, you asked if Beverly has ADHD or any kind of, no, not to our understanding. But there is something that I did want to address, and that's why I want to make sure that it's in this episode so I'm not spoiling. And forgive me, guys, but like just plowing through as I've been writing, going back and trying to remember what's in each one. Okay. I wanted to talk about, oh, I don't think it is in this one. We talked about the Idaho 4.
Right.
And I'm just making sure that it's mentioned in this.
You cannot see the interrogation videos anywhere yet. I mean, we hope someday to be able to get those, but it's not in our hands. So, it's like the evidence in any case. It's like wrestling somebody's gun out of their cold dead hands. It's very difficult to do. Like they just don't turn stuff over. And at this point, FOIA requests have gone rebuffed.
We have the interrogation video, but I cannot
Right, we're not free to
share
use
it.
it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that's different than if you had gotten it via FOIA. Then you're able to do with it what you please. But we had to get it through different avenues, so which we're not at liberty to share it at this point. So as far as did you find a question?
No, I was going to say that, but was she lying or just mistaken? Again, so this plays into her mindset around trauma. She was so focused on, and we did extensively interview her lifelong friends, to get kind of a profile of her personality, how she handles stress, how she, and they all said that she was a crier. Her eldest son said that, there was not fighting in the house, that if Julie got upset, she would just cry. And so we do know that um, the general consensus among her friends was that they could just see her freezing, this almost frozen response where 5 minutes could have passed and it was actually 20 minutes. In other words, she just shut down. And so I do not consider having extensively grilled Julie Beverly on this, the Walmart thing as a lie. I think it's where she was heading. I think it is what she intended to do. I think that she had been there multiple times, so she knew the right place to park in terms of the safety of the kids when loading them outside the car. And I think that she just had a mental blip because once she did remember that she went to Huck's, they called that in thinking that that would clear her. It didn't.
Yeah, I mean, what might have been helpful at trials to have a psychologist testify as to
Mhm.
the human mind and how it responds to trauma. And, because that's why it brought up the frozen shock phase thing from Idaho 4. It's the same concept. It's like, I think there's a distinct possibility that your mind kind of clips certain segments in terms of your thought process. Like when you walk into that situation, her mind might have stopped moving forward in the sense of how we're able to think ahead, and she may have just been stuck in terms of like what you're saying. Like, is she like, is that where her brain was? Like where she's not, because you have to be thinking, like, think about everything that would be going through your mind at that moment in time. I
Mhm.
mean, all of it.
Mhm.
Like, oh my God, what am I seeing? Like your brain trying to process what you're actually looking at, which seems like that would be near impossible. The
And that it
fact of
happened
like,
on your
yeah,
watch,
that it happened on your watch, and
and it was not your child.
right, like that's what I mean. Like, and that's just like the tip of the iceberg with all the shit that would be going through your mind at that moment in time. So like the concept of you just kind of cinching up mentally, I mean, it is certainly uh not only plausible but probably likely. Like, I mean, it's like, I mean, you have to imagine she was in a state of shock. If you're of the mindset that she didn't do it, there's no way she's not in a state of shock. There's no way. I mean, we've all heard the 911 call. I think it's absolutely authentic. There was no part of it that seemed even remotely staged to me. And then when she loses her shit in the interrogation.
Spoiler alert, that's
Oh,
not in
that's
this
not
episode.
what? Oh, I thought it was.
Mm-mm.
Oh man.
It's coming.
Oh boy.
We do deal with the initial beginning of the interrogation and the collection of the crime scene DNA, which actually, were this not such a serious, um, awful, heartbreaking situation, no matter what side of the fence you've fallen on, the DNA collection is almost comedic.
Yeah. I mean, the processing of the crime scene in general, in toto, is laughable. I mean, it's a, it's like you said, like if it wasn't so tragic, the result of it, it would be hilarious.
I mean,
It's like Keystone Cops times 1,000.
I will never forget the first time I watched the DNA collection. And it's all laid out in the episode, but you have Matt Deschamps, who is with the Illinois State Police Crime Scene Collection Unit. I don't know if that's the technical term for it, but he introduces himself. He comes in wearing gloves. And as he walks in, he props open the door with his left hand as he's walking in. Then he collects the folders that Geitman and Eggemeyer had left on the small round table with both hands, his gloved hands, moves them to the side, and he never changes his gloves once. Not once. Even as he like fishes in his pocket, pulls out a ruler, touches the ruler to her hand, her arm, puts it back in his pocket, fishes in his pocket, gets out a pen multiple times, putting things in and out of his pocket, all with the same gloves, swabbing her hands, taking her fingernail scrapings, gesturing and touching his own face as he is referencing the wounds that she claims to have sustained while encountering a masked assailant.
Yeah, tainted.
All the same gloves.
Tainted love. Boop, boop.
Nothing to love about this, though.
Nothing to love about that.
And I mean, when I had Katie Hartman, who is just a phenomenally wonderful, principled former CSI with over 2 decades of law enforcement experience, married to a detective, when she watched it, because I had started, kid you not, a Google Doc with I started out exact seconds of each time that I, as somebody who has not been formally trained in clean collection protocol technique by the Illinois State Police, I started writing exact time, exact second, exact frame of potential issues. I had 3 pages full by the time I was finished watching it for the 3rd time.
I mean, it's yeah. So I got all discombobulated. So Brandy says, I know SIL. Is that sister-in-law? No one was ordered to preserve anything. I guarantee it. Brandy,
Yeah, what is SIL?
Can you flesh that out for us a little bit? Expand on that.
I wouldn't be surprised. Okay, delightfully chaotic. So she was leaving in her mind going to Walmart, but then random slight mishap of needing gas happened. So she had to go there. So it's easy. And you know what? I want to point out something. We have tried to confirm this, but it was apparently in the paperwork that accompanied the full discovery. But Beverly's car was on empty. So think about what kind of a ice cold, blood in her veins mastermind did she have to be to say, okay, I'm going to wait. I'm going to wait until the car's on absolute empty. And then I'm going to wait until there is this time when it's just the 2 of us alone. And then it's just.
And then I'm going to do something super fucking stupid and say that I went to Walmart, which they're obviously going to be able to figure out in a heartbeat. Like that's where the lie actually works in her favor, that she wasn't masterminding all this shit.
Nope. And then I'm going to go discard of the bloody clothing, clothing dripping with blood. A pair of, shoes. Yep. The murder weapon. And I'm going to do it at a gas station with all the cameras in 11 o'clock in the morning, like midday. And I'm going to do it even though my mother manages gas stations. And so I would know damn well that there are security cameras everywhere. Sometimes the simplest explanation is the right one. And
good old Occam's razor.
And as far-fetched as A crazy guy with a knife broke into my house while I was gone sounds. How crazy does the prosecution's theory sound?
I mean, it's so like if you know Julie Beverly, it sounds insane. You know,
Yeah.
yeah, like that's the thing about it. Like if you're just reading it on paper and you don't know anybody involved, Julie doing it doesn't sound insane. When you start to dig into this case, when you start to find out from people that know her best and from all walks of her life, whether it be her mother, whether it be her siblings, whether it be her friends, whether it be just associates, whether it be her pseudo in-laws, like whatever the case may be, sitting quietly in a chair at a family party that's not her family is not a smoking gun to me at all. It's not indicative of anything in terms of anything that would like send up a red flag for me in particular. But you know, there's that you've got that thing where you're looking back at all the occurrences that you've experienced with her if you're on that side of it and you're like, "Oh, all right, that makes sense." You know, but like we're talking about sociopathic rage. This was not a one and
Which,
done stabbing. This
and keep in
was
mind that rage would have been fully exercised and then compartmentalized because she goes back into her office and works for damn near an hour.
it's
No
crazy.
blood anywhere.
It's crazy. It's crazy. That concept is crazy.
And
Hold
then,
on, I gotta turn my light on. I'm still here. Keep talking.
so, Sheila, yeah, it's an interesting thing because obviously everything cannot be tested, and there is everything, and there is what you would absolutely assume should be tested. And I think that everybody would agree. Julie Beverly's nail scrapings, her finger swabs, should have been tested. It's really telling because in the brief that led up to the appeal, um, the prosecution claimed that Jade's DNA was underneath her fingernails. It was on her. No, it wasn't, because that was never tested. None of it was ever tested. This isn't a question of like, oh, they had the results and they were gatekeeping it. No, if she did it, test it, prove it, show it. What are you afraid of? Why in the world, in what realm would you have, because we will get into the autopsy. That is a whole nother can of worms. Trust me, we will get into that in episode 10 and 11. But there was a very violent struggle, unfortunately, that Jade endured before her life was taken away from her. And you can be sure that she fought valiantly for her life, but the other person on the receiving end of that would have had wounds consistent with that kind of battle.
Yeah.
And certainly there would be remnants of it under not only Jade's fingernails, but the assailant. So if it was Julie Beverly, why wouldn't they why wouldn't that have been the first thing they tested? Slam dunk. And if you really wanted a timeline, any 11-year-old with a bunch of electronics at their disposal, check those. Why wouldn't you want to know if she was texting up until that moment? Why
Why
wouldn't you
wouldn't
want
you
to
wanna
know?
know that? Why wouldn't you wanna know it? Why aren't you trying
That
to build out an accurate
and
timeline with everything at your disposal? It's an absolute mystery to me, and it stinks. Like,
why are you afraid of the facts in this case? Why are you afraid of uncovering evidence? And that is what DNA collection is. It's evidence. So you're only going to cherry pick the one thing, the mark on the arm that you believe was made by the victim as she was fighting for her life. But at the same time, we know that the prosecution also contends that Beverly meticulously cleaned every single inch of her body, except that one spot, which, by the way, that was never fully developed either. So we don't know if it is household DNA. We don't know if it is touch DNA, but we certainly don't know if it's saliva or blood because they didn't fully test it.
Yeah. It's
So, I would have my family members' DNA on me right now because we share the same home.
yeah. I mean, we all would. Anybody in your house, you got their DNA all up in your shit. It's
Oh,
all
I just got a text that SIL is Southern Illinois.
okay.
Ah,
There you go.
well, that makes
It
sense.
also is sister-in-law, just for the record. So Melissa Dotson, I want to flesh that out. So one, don't break the law. Correct. Obviously, yes. It's always a good idea not to break the law. If you do, don't say a word. Got it. True.
No, even if you don't.
But that's why I'm putting it up, especially if you don't. This is your rule of thumb. If you are invited to their house, meaning the police station, if they call you up and say, "Hey, we need you to come on in and talk to us. We just have a few questions for you." You need a lawyer. They do that. If they are going to interview what they consider to be lay witnesses, they will come to your house. They will knock on your door. You can typically step outside. You'll close your door behind you and you can converse with them there. If they are inviting you to the station to come and talk,
They like you.
they like you. You need a lawyer. You need a lawyer at that point. Just know that unequivocally. They don't do that for any other reason. And like, I mean, this is a cautionary tale. This podcast is a cautionary tale as to exactly what can happen to you. Richard Allen is a cautionary tale. Hey, yeah, you want to come pick up your car? Yeah. Him and Kathy drive over. Guy never stepped foot in his home again. He never left the police station. He went from there to prison and now is sentenced to 130 years in prison because he went to go pick up the car and they really just wanted to grill him. So, I mean, it's like, just follow the rule. It's a simple rule. And it doesn't make you look guilty. It makes you look smart. It makes you look like you understand your rights.
Let's go back to the interrogation because I think there are a couple of things that are really interesting about it. One, I will remind everybody of this until episode 11. Well, until episode 10, let's say that. But Beverly has been consistent from day one, day of the murder, that the man she encountered at that door was just a few inches taller than she was, placing his height at around 5'5", 5'6". The average American male, 5'9". Her then fiance, 6 foot. If you're going to create a made up boogeyman who you want to blame this brutal murder on, why make him so unimposing? If he's a made up guy, 6'4", looks like he lifts weights.
It's even 6
Um,
foot. Like even just 6 foot, 6 foot, stocky, like just generic 6 foot stocky guy, right? You don't even need to make him a giant. You're making it
no,
believable.
but
You know what
just
I'm
when
saying?
when you're 4'11" and you're saying, well, he's, just a little bit taller than I am.
That's what I mean. I'm agreeing with you, but you don't even need to go so far as to 6 foot,
It,
6'5". You just make him 6 foot and stocky. Like for a woman who's 4'11", that's a monster.
so number one. Number two, she was portrayed as being emotionless during the interrogation. That's not true. When she mentions finding Jade's body, her she almost like chokes over her own breath, even just recalling the scene. That struck me as very authentic. But most telling was when she broke down, not the breakdown you're referring to, but in this episode, we share that she said, "This is my fault. I should have taken her with me."
Right.
That speaks to innocence.
Really does. I mean, like if you were to ask somebody who fancies themselves, a human lie detector, or somebody who can, really use your words to try to figure out if you're full of shit. I mean, they would be the first to tell you that people that have committed the crimes are never going to do anything that's going to in any way cast additional doubt on them as to their veracity, as to whether or not they're telling the truth and when they're saying they didn't do it. And certainly saying, this is my fault, accepting responsibility in any form of fashion. Like they're just not going to do that. They're always trying to distance themselves from the crime. So for her to have done that to me, and we talked about it in the episode, it was absolutely positively to me indicia of innocence. It really was, because you just don't do that. You're not going to say anything where you're taking some of the blame or taking the blame, because it's like, and I don't know how many cases I've seen it where statements are taken out of context and used at trial. Like they could have easily have just plucked out, oh, this was my fault from her statement, just use those. She said in the interview, it was her fault. I mean, it's like,
Well, even what we have, which is a shortened version of it ended up being nearly 3-hour interrogation, but we will share in an upcoming episode something that they did choose to edit out, which is extremely telling as well.
from their perspective, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think the biggest takeaway, no matter what anybody, thinks in terms of her guilt or her innocence or the bad facts, is don't ever agree to go into questioning without legal representation.
Cautionary tale. So Lily B asks, if a defendant wins an appeal for ineffective assistance of counsel, does it do anything to mitigate the issues that went preserved for appeal?
What a great question.
It's a great question. And the fact of the matter is that typically in a direct appeal, which is your first appeal, that's not where you're raising the ineffective arguments typically. It's not to say that it doesn't happen if there's just egregious ineffective that you just can't avoid bringing it up. It can be raised. Many times you'll see that the heaviest attack on ineffective is typically in a post-conviction relief act petition. And in those situations, I mean, the goal is to get a new trial. So when you're going in on a relief act petition, it's usually twofold. It's one, due to newly discovered evidence, and two, it hammers away at the ineffectiveness of trial counsel. And so if you win that, essentially everything that would, so say for instance, there was somebody like, say, an expert, for instance, that subsequent counsel argues in their post-conviction petition, says, look, if they would hired an expert like a psychologist to maybe try to explain what was going on in Julie Beverly's mind the hours after she just walked in on the most horrific thing that any person on this planet could ever experience, that may have had a deep, profound impact on the jury in terms of swaying it. I mean, if you can mitigate that issue at trial and it didn't happen, and it was because defense counsel just whiffed, that particular issue, the next time around, certainly will be addressed. And the same goes for things that should not have been said. Like in this case, if there's to be a retrial, there's no way in hell they're sending back a box filled with shitty knives and a shower curtain that had nothing to do with the crime with the jury while they're deliberating.
That's a spoiler.
Oh, it is? Oh, and they're it is?
It is. We're not.
Man, you're really
I just scrolled the script again to make sure.
God damn it. Damn it, Lauren. Why do you keep kicking spoilers out there? So, but the point being that they try to cure, if there's a retrial, all the errors that were made. If there were things that were done that shouldn't have been done, those things are not allowed in at the next trial. If there's things that should have been done that weren't done, they try to make sure that those are a part of the trial the next time. I mean, the goal is always to get a fair trial. And if there's evidence that was available, and again, newly discovered's interesting because the DNA under both Julie and Jade's fingernails, which one wasn't tested, one was
not fully tested.
And if the science, which it has through Othram, has advanced to the point where they can take the most microscopic sample and create a profile from it, that constitutes newly discovered. If the technology did not exist at the time that the trial took place, the state can't win an argument saying, well, they could have done that and they didn't. Too bad, so sad. That's not how that thing works. So, that you'll see that all the time as the advancements in science and technology happen. Things that couldn't have been tested. We see it in cases constantly these days. We see it in exonerations all the time. Where they're testing things that they couldn't test because there wasn't enough of a sample back when.
Yeah, but this is, again, this is 2023 when they were at trial. And so they're just things that it's inexplicable that they didn't test or do a better job
I don't
testing.
know if they were doing the SNP, like the SNP stuff that Othram was doing in 2023. Maybe.
Really?
I don't, I'll have to look, like, don't quote me on it, but I mean, that is like, there's not many labs doing it. And the nice thing about that particular lab is that they allow for peer review. Like they're not one of those labs. It's just like, oh, we came up with some new shit, but we're not going to turn over our algorithm. We're not going to turn over our secret sauce because that's where the entire, value of the company is. And if we get
is that your impersonation of a scientist, basically?
Yeah.
Look, we're not turning over the secret sauce.
Listen, man, the secret sauce stays with me. That's that.
It's all up here.
It's all in my brain. You can't see it. But the problem with that is that other scientists can't vet it. And with Othram, they allow peer review. They don't care. They have everything in terms of new science, which you need because you run up against Fry and Daubert in terms of people challenging the science. Is it legitimate? And in order to challenge it, other scientists have to be able to look at it and say, tracks.
Can you break down Fry quickly before?
So like Fry is essentially like Fry and Daubert are basically if there's a challenge as to whether or not a science is legitimate, whether or not it's a junk science. And we've seen it throughout the course of the years. I mean, back in the old days, they used to have like dudes trying to take two hairs and compare them and saying that they're from the same person. Could you imagine convicting people on that? Yeah, they look a lot alike to me. I mean, so so everything, and we go to like bite mark analysis. That is also under
blood spatter analysis.
Blood spatter.
The history of that is fascinating.
And even tool markings is like under massive attack, and you've got like a huge push for that to stay as a way to solve cases. So you've got like two massive lobbies in that particular field wherein, I think everybody agrees they want it to be better, from where it's at right now. And, ultimately at the end of the day, before it destroys humanity, AI is going to figure all this shit out for us. So we'll probably have a nice 10-year period where AI has figured out all of our science issues, and we'll really be able to solve all these cases without error. And then, AI will kill us all. So it'll
I
be
want
cool
to
though.
I want to quickly, Francine Pastina says, I'm so sorry, but I do think she did it.
That's fair.
That's fair. That's totally fair. And Francine, promise me you'll come back next week and promise me you'll come back the following week, because we have to revisit that, because I I would love for you to explain how.
Yeah. Well, hold on.
After we share what we now know. And
And in
and look,
fairness to Francine, like she hasn't spent any time with Drew. Like this is a case where, and I think that Lauren brought this up last week about that, and I don't want to give another spoiler, like about. Do we already cover this part with that 9 out of 10 stabbings are committed by?
that is next week.
Okay, so like yeah, check back with us. There's more. There's more, but I think that she is at a disadvantage because in this case in particular, the physicality of this crime, without having ever laid eyes on this person, it's impossible to really be able to evaluate whether or not you think that she did it unless you lay eyes on her. And even more importantly, which, frankly, no one has the opportunity to do, which is to meet her and spend time with her because she's in prison, but like you get a different sense of who you're dealing with, because I'm telling you, the level of violence that was displayed in this crime is next level. It's next level. Like this poor child was running around
Mhm.
with somebody chasing her in order to finish the job. And there just is nothing that exists in the state's narrative that can explain why that would be Julie. Like you don't have to prove a motive, but there needs to be a reason why this happened.
I was just going to tell Mandy that Francine's comment was posted at 6:07 p.m. my time, so 5:07 yours. And look, it is not our objective to convince anybody
Right.
of anything.
100%. Like
We are
we're just going to put it
questioning,
out there. Right.
yeah, whether or not
And
one.
frankly, I love the pushback. I
I do
mean, like that's the conversation that I want to have. And I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, when 11 hits, and you guys have heard it all, like I want to have like a massive live about it. I want to do it, and let's talk it out. Like I want to talk it out. I want everybody who's like, I listen,
Mhm.
not convinced. Let's
because
chat it out.
because justice is a very, very fragile concept. It really is. And if you don't have the presumption of innocence, if you don't prove something beyond a reasonable doubt, it very quickly crumbles under scrutiny. And that's what this podcast is doing. It is questioning whether or not an individual got a fair trial and whether there has been justice for either Jade or Julia Beverly. And you can have both.
100%. 100%.
Um,
Melissa, there's a great question, Bob. What if you're being detained? Are we entitled to a free attorney if it's just questioning? Negative. You are not appointed to counsel until you're under arrest. So,
but you're free to leave until that
but you're
point.
right. You are absolutely free to leave. Like you will ask them, "Am I free to leave?" And if they aren't detaining you, then they have to let you leave. I mean, the problem is, and that's always a balancing act when we file motions about whether or not Miranda should have been read, whether or not the person was considered detained. That is always one of the primary factors that is weighed, whether or not a reasonable person would feel that they were free to leave. If a reasonable person does not feel that they were free to leave, and you'll go through that entire scenario when you're arguing these motions. Okay, well, they took me into first, they brought me in through a buzz door. We walked through the offices. We went down 3 hallways. We went up 2 flights of stairs, and I went into a room way in the back. Oh, but we left the door to the interrogation room cracked open. Okay, well, no one's thinking that they can just walk out. No normal citizen. Talking about what a normal citizen, a normal person wouldn't do in that situation, no normal person thinks that they could walk out of there. Like they feel like they're in custody. And so, yeah, you ask, am I free to leave? First, you say, I'm not talking to you without a lawyer. Can I go? It's that simple. You do those 2 things.
And you blame it on Bob.
And you blame it on me. And if you say, if they, because they're required by law, if you lawyer up, you say, I am not speaking to you without my lawyer present, they have to shut it down right there. So they're going to let you know right then and there. Okay, well, I got news for you. We're arresting you. So we took a run at you just to see if you'd talk, but you're not going anywhere. You've done yourself the favor of not having given them any more evidence against you. And you've figured out whether or not you're free to leave. Now, if they're not arresting you, they've got to let you go. So, I mean, one way or the other. And then the next thing is, if they do take you into custody and you get your phone call, don't talk about what they're saying that you did. Don't talk about the crime over the phone. Just say, hey, whoever you're calling, I need a lawyer. This is where I'm at. And that's it. They record everything. They listen to everything.
I was going to say, you can bet your bottom dollar that you're being recorded.
And thank you for your generosity, Melissa. Appreciate
it. We went over.
I know. All right. So this will be our last question. Is there anything else you wanted to see that we wanted to ask? You guys were great today. A lot of great questions today. So what laws or statutes currently exist that don't allow anybody to request the DNA and process it on their own regard? Why are we not further protecting victims by solidifying perpetrators? It's an amazing question.
That is an amazing question. Kraken Studio, The Real Booty, has had a lot of excellent questions.
Kraken Studio, The Real Booty is like genius level, like on all kinds of shit. Like she's always sending me like tips for like tech, like all kinds of stuff. She's amazing in a lot of different ways. The best I can tell you is that if you don't have standing in a case, that they're just not going to turn it over. Like, for instance, and there's nothing that you can do to compel it. Like you can't even get into a court in front of a judge if you don't have standing in the case.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? So like, say for instance, in the West Memphis 3, where there's been this battle for, it seems like a decade now, and where they now have the technology to test these other DNA samples that they have, testing this evidence that they found that has never been tested. And, you know, they're in there and they're giving the guys shit in terms of Damien and Jason. And they're saying, you know what? You don't have to, like, you're out. You took a plea and you're out now. Like we reserve that for people. If you're coming in on like kind of a post conviction or a habeas, a writ of habeas, trying to get the thing tested because you want to exonerate yourself, which is what they want to do. But, you know, I knew it going in. I'm like, they're going to say that, like, that is reserved for people that are still incarcerated. They're going to say that they don't have standing anymore, which is exactly what the court did. Now, then they retracted. So when that happened, I'm like, what about the victims' families, don't they deserve to know? Like, why in the world, under what, like what logical explanation do you have, court, to not test this so that the families
Can get answers
maybe get a real answer?
and closure.
And whether it's the boys or not.
And
Either
justice
way.
and justice has an actual shot.
Exactly. It's frustrating. It's frustrating. Very, very frustrating.
Oh, there's another one. Good question. And then so
Oh man.
we're not sure. I can tell you that Butch has had his run-ins with the law previously, and his son has had continuing run-ins with the law. And so perhaps Butch is being protective, but we haven't given up.
Or he just wants to stay out of it.
Yeah.
But either way, too bad. Like
He
Butch,
was
my
there's a
estimation.
reason why he was on the prosecution's witness list.
Well, let me just put this ponderable out there. If we were to all hear from Butch that, yeah, I made a phone call to 911 that morning, and yeah, I saw somebody dressed in black
In a mask.
in a mask running through my backyard at or around the time that Julie Beverly claims that this person she got in a scuffle with ran out of the house. I mean, is that not absolutely positively exculpatory evidence? I mean, I talk about, like, what are the odds? What are the odds of that happening? Meaning that can't be a coincidence. There is no world. If you want to say, well, what are the odds of somebody sitting on that house and going in when they see Julie leave because they think nobody's in there and they're trying to steal whatever they can get to get some meth money, and they run into a kid in there and lose their shit, and it ends the way it ended. Like, if that's so implausible, I mean, what level of implausibility does the neighbor seeing a person that exactly matches the description of the person that walked into that house is claiming that she saw running through the backyard? Like, to me, it's open and shut. It's done. Let her out immediately and let's go find the son of a bitch.
And keep in mind that back heavily wooded property that has some kind of abandoned camper that serves as a makeshift um, Airbnb for people who are unhoused. Um, it's very complicated, and
Because
so
we know
perhaps
that call took place. We know that call to 911 took place.
and it was rerouted. And the first private investigator, Hightower hired, heard talk of it, um, overheard police referencing it. So there's a lot. There's a lot that wasn't properly looked into. And back to Francine's point, if Beverly is guilty, why all the shenanigans?
Right. All right, y'all.
That's
So
it.
that's it. Y'all make sure you're waiting with bated breath by your little whatever you listen to your podcasts on, whether it's this guy or something else.
So
Everything will drop Wednesday night at 2 a.m. or maybe
yes, and nine is an eye opener, but 10 is a bombshell. So anybody who has the subscription where they get stuff a week early, please prepare to be floored if you're gonna listen to 10 ahead of time.
Flizzord. All right, you guys are the best. Lauren, you're the best.
Right back at you.
We always
And
appreciate you guys.
great questions tonight.
Phenomenal. You guys are amazing. It was really great. I anticipate that the next few lives that we do will be just like this. A lot of stuff going on, a lot of lot of exciting things to talk about next week. So we will see you next Tuesday, same bat time, same bat channel. We love you.
Mwah.
Ciao.
All right. Have a great week, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.